The Post Newspaper Podcast, your community news. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back to the podcast. My special guest today is Mr. Jacob Reeder, a League City resident and someone who is the vice president of the Baytown Cemetery Group, the Hill of Rest Cemetery located in Baytown, Texas. Jacob, good to have you on.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I couldn't help but discovering on your Facebook not too long ago that you had taken an interest in the Baytown Cemetery, and I know recently I had kind of informally met you at a cleanup at the historic League City Cemetery right behind my house here. So you have an interest in cemeteries. Let's talk about how you got involved with the Baytown Cemetery.
Well, I would say I kind of fell into it a little bit. As you mentioned, I help out at the League City Fairview Cemetery. And, I guess you could say I've kind of picked up some of the administrative part of it. I'm good friends with some of the people out there, yourself included. And, I have family in Baytown. My mother and my brother live out there. And I had gotten word that there was an older property, an older site that had not had as much attention as it should have been. It needed some TLC. And I reached out to some people there, a lady named Pam Johnson, actually, and she had been organizing some cleanup days. And I went out there and, we did some work and we kind of got everything, mowed down. It's a big property and it's summer and it's raining and it grows constantly. And I kind of got the story of, where they were at. And, I took it and I ran with it. And, it's a journey so far. I've learned quite a bit about starting nonprofits and corporations and all that stuff. So it's definitely a do-it-yourself journey so far.
Now, how did you first learn about that cemetery out there? Because that's quite a drive from League City.
So, like I said, I do have family that lives out in
Yeah.
Baytown. My mom and brother, and I had come across a few Facebook postings from various friends, and Facebook's been kind of an integral part of this whole thing, just because you can utilize it as a tool to put the word out. You can do events and you can create pages, and I personally had never really done that before. It had just been, for my own personal use, pictures of my kids and stuff like that. And the more I dug into this, the more I discovered you could utilize Facebook as such a strong, powerful marketing tool. And I had noticed these posts from a friend, and I reached out and I said, I see that they're trying to organize some cleanup at this place. Can you tell me more about it? And from that, my connection tree just grew from this to this. And I've connected with probably 80 or 90 people now, just trying to gain contacts and things like that. So it's been really interesting so far.
What would you say, Jacob, are parallels between the cemetery out there and the cemetery here? They're both what we would consider historic cemeteries, being that they go back to the early 20th century and maybe a little bit further back than that. But now that you've participated in working in both, what are some of the parallels you've experienced?
So it's interesting. There's quite a bit of parallels with both sites. For example, we work at Fairview in League City, and they're roughly about the same age. I want to say Hill of Rest was incorporated allegedly in 1903, even though it was used as a private site and things like that. But at Fairview, it's sort of similar. There's local founding people of the city. There's veterans. There's Freemasons. There's a lot of different types of families out there. The unfortunate part of it is, for the most part, especially in Baytown, the land is effectively full. So there's no plots for sale, and obviously, having no room for plots, you can't sell graves and you can't make money. So in that aspect, there's no income to provide maintenance and upkeep. Fairview's very similar. Excuse me. Fairview's very similar, except for to my knowledge, they do have some plots that are still for sale. But it's one of those things where I feel that it's important to keep these sites active. They're both on the historical registry. I actually just spoke to Mr. Chuck Chandler here pretty recently, and the Baytown site's actually going to be dedicated with their historical marker pretty soon. And I do feel like that's important. There's these local places with so much history, and they kind of get forgotten about. Um, and I kind of wanted to share some of my experience with Fairview to the folks in Baytown, just because Fairview has a very strong organization. It's got a very strong board. There's a lot of activity in the community. I mean, you could almost look at it like it's a little city park. I mean, I go
Right.
down there and read sometimes. I sit under a tree and I take my book with me. Um, so in that aspect, I'd like to transfer some of the good aspects over to the Baytown location as well.
I used to do the same thing. I'd be known to frequent cemeteries. I don't know why. It's never really bothered me until I discovered that the family had recently bought some plots out there. Now you can't. I don't want to hardly go out there. I don't want to see where I'm going to be. So it's just a little personal thing for me. But it's a beautiful cemetery. I know you just got involved with the Baytown Cemetery relatively recently, but have you discovered any interesting historical facts or people that may be buried there?
I find a lot of interesting things in some of the research that I do, and some of the things that I look up are it, there's a lot of interesting people that are in both locations, but especially Baytown, just because there's World War One vets, there's World War Two vets. I reached out to a lady recently. She shared a huge amount of photographs of her grandfather from World War One and his uniform and his story. And I look at these things kind of almost it's almost like a time machine kind of because these sites have been out there for so long, and if the family is passed on or they're older, it can be hard to keep up with things and remember. But it's kind of neat because we're able to reach out to other people and kind of get their stories. For example, there's a gentleman out there that was a flying tiger in World War II.
Hmm.
I mentioned the Freemasons earlier. I'm an active Mason,
Right.
and there's quite a few Masons out there. And one gentleman was he was part of the Grand Lodge and things like that. And the deeper I dig into these things, the more I can kind of bring out these older stories. It's almost like flipping through an old photo album.
Hmm. That's really interesting. Myself having ties to the lodge and being very appreciative of it myself. I always when I go to cemeteries I look to see if there are any members out there, and it kind of means a lot to me when I see them out there being memorialized like that. Now the cemetery in Baytown itself, clearly that's been there a long time. So who
Mhm.
who sort of owned it? Who did it belong to? And what was the process like to sort of get, I guess, whoever owned it, get that transferred to you so you can maintain it, or do you own it? How does all that
Well,
work?
it's pretty interesting the way that it works is basically the individual plots are controlled by the individual's families.
Sure.
So, there's some people that have sections that are specific to their family. There's others where it's singles and things like that. There's actually an area for kids, which is kind of, a
Mm-hmm.
little sad. But one of the big aspects of that is the individuals actually still own the plot. So it's an interesting link that you have to put together because I technically don't own any of the property.
Right.
But what we do is we've incorporated this, and I'm moving towards creating it into a nonprofit. So my end goal with the whole thing is I would like to obtain nonprofit status. That way we can conduct fundraising and apply for grants and things like that to keep regular maintenance up. So as far as ownership goes, I don't own any part of it.
Right.
I
Right.
I do the grunt work. I try to organize as much as I can and things like that. And to tie back to what you said a little bit, I do feel like it's kind of a necessary. I do feel like it's a necessary thing to do in the community, just because people do sometimes forget, or people move on, or they get older and they're unable to go out and put the time into these things. And I do kind of feel like you have to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves.
Exactly. So talk about the upkeep on the facility out there. Now, first, how big is it, and then how, and two, like I say, what goes into keeping it up?
It's roughly 6.5 acres. It's on Goose
Okay.
Creek. And I've actually posted. I'm sure everybody's tired of seeing my Facebook posts, but I'm trying to do the grassroots thing as cheaply as possible. That's the folly of a nonprofit, is you make none profit. And so, but
Mm,
basically, it's 6.5 acres. It's sort of an odd shape. It's on the creek, and parts of it are kind of eroded because it's been there for so long. But as far as the upkeep is concerned, it's a lot of there's a lot of mowing, obviously, especially since it's been the rainy season. Um, Weed eating obviously is a big factor because the weeds grow up over the stones, they grow over the curb, and before you know it, you can't see any of them. Um, there are broken stones out there that I'm eventually going to look into seeing how they could be repaired, things like that. A lot of it is groundskeeping and kind of yard related items, just because, we get a lot of down trees, we get a lot of, overgrowth and things like that. Um, the big part is we try to do all of those things on a volunteer basis. So what we've tried to set up is a recurring event, monthly, and I have to thank Mrs. Pam Johnson for that, just because she kind of started the organization on that. And her idea was the last Saturday of every month. So that's sort of the goal right now, and everybody kind of shows up, and you kind of do what you can. If you have a mower, great. If you have a lawnmower, great. I'm looking into quotes from lawn services and things like that. Obviously, that can be sort of cost prohibitive just because it's so much land. But as of right now, we're doing a lot of volunteering, and show up with a mower and mow a section or two.
yeah,
I have a friend from Lodge, actually. I have his son coming out next week. He mows lawns on the side, and we'll get him to mow a section or two, and have a little have a little party out there.
absolutely. So you mentioned earlier a little bit of the location along Goose Creek. Now, in specific, where is it located at? If people aren't familiar with that area.
So it's right off of Market Street, and it's directly
Hmm.
across from Lee High School, which is also a
Okay.
historic site too. Actually, I'm not
Right.
100% sure of the year, but it's got a kind of a 50s modern look to it. It's actually a
Hmm.
really pretty high school, but it's directly across the street from the high school, so it's very visible, and that's another reason why we try to kind of keep up with it, just because it's right off of the main road.
Hmm.
It's not back in a neighborhood, it's not out of the way, it's right there. Um, which in and of itself can be kind of a factor, just because, people drive by it every day.
Yeah, that's true. Do you get any support from any of the other community associations or the city, or are you kind of out there kind of winging it on your own? You and the board members and the volunteers.
We, as of now, the volunteers and myself, I'm trying to take the various contacts that I've been given and kind of incorporate everything together. I've been given a lot of phone numbers, a lot of emails, and a lot of stuff like that, and I'm on the phone a lot. I actually kind of strangely created a second job for myself with Facebook and Instagram and websites and incorporations, and I find myself doing this stuff well into the night lately. But what we're trying to do is get as many people who have interest in this possible and put it all together.
Hmm.
There's a gentleman out there that runs a Christian Alliance, and he's had a lot of input in the past. They've come out and done a ton of work. There's a lot of people in the community that have done a lot for this location, and we're hoping to kind of take all of those things and just link them all together.
Hmm.
They have. people again, I think I mentioned before, there's people out there that have family sections, and they'll mow a section or two, but at the same time, I do feel like it's good for everybody to kind of put their efforts together, and we can we can make it into a big campaign. I've tried to reach out to the city a little bit. That's a very complicated rope to climb, for lack of a better term. Um, I don't know how much involvement they're going to have with it in the future. I do know that I believe there's been some contact made prior. I don't know what materialized from it then, but um, that's sort of where we're at, though. We have a lot of people that are willing to kind of help us out, and that's the main thing of it. I think there's a gentleman named Ted Murray out there, and he runs part of the Christian Alliance, and he's very active in that location. They've done a ton of work out there. Um, and like I said, I don't feel that it should fall to one individual or one group. I feel like it's obviously it's a team effort, and hopefully we can keep it going. That's the obviously the main goal.
So, for anyone that may be interested in setting up something like this, maybe there's a historic cemetery in their area. Maybe it's on the verge of becoming derelict, so to speak, and who knows who's in charge of it, and they want to do what you did. How hard is it to get this going? This whole process of incorporating everything going.
I will say this: the internet is obviously a great resource. Google is your friend when it comes to these things. I was lucky. I know I brought up Chuck Chandler with the Historical Society. His information, excuse me, his information has been invaluable. Just with surveying and records and historical notes, which, by the way, I have access to his report on our website if anybody's interested. It's a very good read. Um, as far as actually setting up the corporation, there's a lot of notes on it and there's a lot of information. You have to make sure that you don't get sucked into a do it yourself system too easily, because then they want to sell you add-ons. As soon as you say the corporation word, everybody wants to start selling you websites and reporting and tax information and all those things. And you have to you have to be mindful to not get sucked into that too much. The IRS actually has a lot of information, if you can believe that, about setting up nonprofits and things like that too. So there's some great resources out there. Um, I was lucky. I had a lot of really good people to speak to about it as well. Luckily, we have the other group in Fairview who kind of steered me in direction. John Scholkopf at the board there at Fairview was very integral in kind of pushing me in the right direction on some of those things too. So I was lucky. I have a pretty extensive phone book, so I had a couple of pretty good head starts.
Absolutely, those connections, that networking is the key to either being successful or pulling your hair out. So, sorry, Jacob, couldn't
Yeah,
resist
it's
pulling your hair
this
out
is
there.
this is just a week ago. This is what the nonprofit did to me.
Oh, okay. We're not trying to scare anyone off and setting up a nonprofit, but certainly a worthy cause for sure. Jacob, if anyone wants to get involved, whether it's coming out and cutting grass or donations, I know you said you're still a little ways from the nonprofit status, but I think if people wanted to donate, they probably could. But how's the best way to get involved with, get in contact with you if they want to help out in some way?
So I tried to set up as many avenues with communications as I could. We have a very active Facebook group at the moment. I just started an Instagram page, which I'm not incredibly Instagram savvy, so I'm crash coursing my way through that. We do have a GoFundMe set up. We have a Venmo account, with our corporate bank account. So we do have various ways of donating. And I always try to reiterate this too. If you can't, if you're not able to do manual labor, moral support's nice too. We'll take a couple of cases of water or something, or just come out and say hi. I mean, if you're unable to come out and work, and like I said, there's a lot of older folks that are involved too, and it's 100 degrees. It's hard to go out there and push a mower. It's hard to run a weed eater for hours. So yeah, just come out and say hi, just come see what it's all about. But those resources we do use for donations, and once I get the nonprofit up and running, I'm hoping that we'll get those sweet tax breaks, and we can really start moving towards fundraising and things like that. Some future plans on that. We really want to try to do host a fundraiser, maybe a raffle, and some things like that to kind of get the word out and get some cash flow in a little bit, so to speak.
So, uh, so Jacob, we were talking earlier about it being located in Goose Creek and by Lee High School. So the actual
Yes.
address, what's the actual address?
It's 1600 Market Street in Baytown, Texas. If you're going down Market Street, you can't miss it. It's
Okay.
it's a big property. It's right next to the creek, but the actual physical address is 1600 Market Street, Baytown, Texas.
And is there an email if people want to contact you, or should they just go through the social media channels that we've listed?
I do have an email address as well, and that's sort of where all my official business kind of goes through at the moment. It's baytowncemetery@gmail.com. And but between one of the communication resources we have, somebody will see an email in there. I'm on it pretty regularly lately. Okay.
Well, very good. Well, Jacob, I appreciate you coming on and talking about the effort to get, preserve that cemetery. It's certainly a worthwhile thing, and I wish you and the board and all the volunteers the best of luck. And I hope you get lots of support to restore that cemetery.
Thank you, Richard. We really appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting our effort to share the news in print and on our extensive website, and now on our new YouTube channel. Contact publisher David Day at area code 409-943-4265 to support the Post newspaper today.